Hello and welcome to the channel. So I'm here to tell you about making a responsive menu. So I'm just going to do it really simply so that I'm just going to take it one step at a time. I'm going to build it in a very simple way to begin with, and I'm also going to then add a little bit of complexity at the end. But the other thing I should point out is that I'm going to build this as if I'm making it first for the larger screen. Some people tend to do it the other way around and build a menu for mobile and then produce the media queries to change it when it goes into a big screen. But I'm going to do it the other way around, simply because we tend to be doing that for our other work. We're obviously starting on a big screen, we're working on a big screen. So let's do it that way first, and then it makes it a little bit easier to understand, I think. Okay, so first of all, I've got my VS Code open at the moment. I just want to actually create some content. So the first thing I'm going to do is going to create a file called index.html. Naturally enough, that's the usual thing that we start with. I'm going to add a folder for my CSS, and then inside that folder I'm also going to add another file called styles.css. As long as I can spell it correctly, we should be good to go. I think I've got it now. Yeah. Okay, so here's our as yet empty index file. So let's actually just put our boilerplate in here, you know, with the usual exclamation mark and tab, which will give us that basic content there. So here we actually call it responsive menu. Okay, now you don't want to watch me type all this stuff in, so I'm just going to basically start off by copying and pasting in here some content, which is just basically a navigation bar. So we've got some other stuff. Of course, a website's going to have a lot more than that. But this is my my nav. So you can see that I've got an item called nav, and then I've got an unordered list with some list items in it. But then I've actually got one item here which is information, and inside that I've got some sub-menu. Just to clarify how that works. So here we have the list items, but then the one that has sub-menus, the list item doesn't close until the end of a further UL which is inside that. So you've got a UL nested inside a list item. And then of course we've got anchor links, hyperlinks here that are just going to nowhere currently, but we do need to have those in here as well for the purpose of the demonstration. Obviously when we're building the thing in reality, these will be linked to some content either elsewhere or within the same page. So how does this look? Well, we can always use our marvelous Go Live browser and just have a look at this. Let me just bring that onto the screen. Let's actually organize ourselves a little bit better here. So I'll make that into just quite a slim browser window there, and actually shrink this down a little bit as well. So we've got the two things side by side. We don't need all of this space over here either, so let's actually just organize it a little bit better. Okay, so as you can see, we've now got the basic unordered list with some nested list items. These things would normally, as I say, be linked to somewhere else. So let's now just add a few things into our CSS. So we're going to go to our styles CSS, and I'm just going to, again, I'm not going to type this in for you, I'm just going to do some copying and pasting. So the first thing I'm going to do is just take my some of the things that I normally put into all of my CSS, something to do with removing all of the margins and the padding on everything. So this is our wildcard universal selector, the asterisk, and that's basically saying no margins anywhere. Box sizing, border box, that just simply makes sure that when we're measuring things, we're measuring both the margin and the padding and the border itself. Don't worry too much about that. And then I've just decided to put in a sans serif font, giving the body a little bit of a margin, so that at least it's not crashing up against the edge. So let's actually just save that. That should immediately refresh over here. Of course it doesn't, because we haven't made the link to this styles document, one thing that we should always do. So I'm going to go back into my my HTML into the head tag, and I'm just going to create the link to that document there. So that's actually in something called css/styles.css. Save that, and now we've got what we want here now. Okay, so we just arrange these things in a much simpler way. Okay, now what we're going to start off with then is we're going to do something to this to first of all make this list be a list that moves across the page rather than down the page. Now, the way that we actually do that is what we actually have to do is we have to first of all we're going to give it a width of 100%, and we're also going to fix it at the top. So let's just, again, I'll put that in for you and you can see what I mean. I'll go through and explain it as we go. So let's start off by doing something in our CSS again. So the nav then has a width of 100% with a position of fixed. So in other words, I want it to be always there. So in other words, when we're scrolling down, presuming that we've got a lot of content on our page, we don't want this navigation to move down. We want this to actually stay at the top. So we've got a position of fixed, and we're making it go to the top, and we're making it have be over to the left. We're going to give it a background color. I'm just putting grey in there for the moment, doesn't matter. And that part there is really the starting point. But obviously I've also then targeted the unordered list inside the navigation, inside the nav. So here we have a box called nav. Inside there we've got an unordered list. So this line 22 here is saying, now what we want to do is we want to take the list, make the list style to be none. We don't want the bulleted points. So we're taking that off. We're also making it a flex item, a box, if you like. So UL is a flex item, meaning that the items inside it will be flex objects, or flex items, I should say. So let me just save that and you'll see what happens. Okay, so starting off then, we've got everything at the top. Just going to bring it. Oh, it is actually all on the screen, so that's fine. It looks a mess at the moment, but that's fine. Don't worry about that. So at the moment, then we've actually arranged it right and left. We put it over to the right because we were using justify content flex n, so we put it all the way over there. I'll just show you what I mean by that. If we want to make it go to the left, we would just say flex start. Again, spelling it correctly, please, like so. And as you can see, that now puts it over to there. I'm preferring to make it go to the right hand side, so I'm going to go for n, keep it at end like that. Now, at the moment, because we've got some items which are sub-items, they're also showing as well and making a bit of a mess of it. As you can see underneath information, we've got these other things, which again are sort of crowding out a little bit. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do something about those different items in there. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take the list items inside that, and I'm going to turn them off. Now I'll just do it this way, the sub-menus. So I'm going to take the first part of the sub-menu, because we've got quite a few things to do for the sub-menus. But the first thing I'm going to do is just simply take the sub-menus and make them display none. Now I'm also positioning them, but again, you don't need to worry about that for the moment. So at least now we've hidden those. So because they're display none, they're not actually going to come up. Now the next thing that I want to do is to focus on the list items, the top level list items, that's these that you see here. I want to focus on those, and I want to actually, obviously, as you can see, I want to spread them out a little bit, give them a bit of a space, not only between them, but I also want that navigation bar to have a bit of height. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to just take this first item here. So the list items inside, I'll just put that one down further down the bottom. I'm going to put the list items inside it, and they are actually going to be flex items, because they are inside the unordered list, which is a flex box. And those flex items then we need to tell it whether we want to grow the items if they've got space, or we want to shrink the items if they need to. But we're going to stop any shrinking or growing, but we will want to give them a flex basis. Now you can see that I've actually done it here, flex 008 rem. Now what that basically means is there's a shortcut really for flex grow, flex shrink and flex basis. It's just a shortcut really. You can put them all in one rule just called flex, and that's what I've done. I've made no shrink, no grow, but give it a flex basis of 8 rem. Now again, we can adjust these numbers, but I mean, I've actually played around with this and given it that number. That does seem to work. I'm also aligning it in the center. Now, before I save this and refresh it, there's one other thing that is really important, and that is we need to turn off this underlining. Now again, hyperlinks will always have an underline by default. So whenever you see, if you just build a page with hyperlinks without any styling, the default is that those links will have an underline. And that of course does make sense if you think about it. If you've got a whole lot of text and you've got hyperlinks within it, this was always the standard way of showing that something is a hyperlink and can be clicked on and go off somewhere else. But I'm actually going to turn that off. So I'm going to turn that off. So the way that we do that is we target the anchor within the list item. So you'll see now if I put this in here, we've actually got, so the nav is our top level, the unordered list is the next level down, the list item is then within the unordered list, and the anchor that adds the A tag is within that. So we're saying text decoration none. I'm also giving it some padding. Again, like I said, I want to spread this out a bit. I want to give it some space around, and I also want to deepen the navigation bar itself. Now, anchor tags, that is the A tag, by default is an inline item. That means, because again, if you think about it, normally you have an anchor tag inside some text, where you're creating hyperlinks, and basically that means that it's inline. But we don't want this to be inline actually. We want this to have some depth to it, some space to it. So the way that we do that is to turn it into a block level item, and we do that with display block, as you can see. So display block is there for that purpose. So I'm now going to save this and we'll see what actually happens. So again, it's spreading things out for us, so that we can now begin to see how this is building up. Don't worry about the colours, we can come back and play about with that later. Now the next thing is that these things we need to sort of work out what we want to happen when we actually go over these items. When we click over these items, we want these items to then be, to navigate somewhere or whatever. Now, as you can see, when I click on them, they do actually become, to begin with, they all immediately change colour. That's because they're now visited, because we have now visited them, they've changed colour. That's something that we can address later, but don't worry too much about that right now. That's just a small detail. But what we do need to do is to decide what happens when we hover over them. When our mouse moves over them, what do we want to happen? And the way that we provide that feedback is to do something, well, simply about the colour. We can do other things. We can change the text to bold, or we could actually put an underline or a border or whatever. But what we're going to do is just going to provide a background colour. So the way that we do that then is with this pseudo item called a hover. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. So as you can see, I'm targeting the list item inside the unordered list again, but after list item, or LI, we put the colon and then hover. And that actually is sort of giving feedback when the mouse is, or when the cursor is hovering over that. So I'm going to save that, and now you can see what actually happens. Okay, now we're changing the background color on that block. So the list item itself because the list item itself is actually that big. When we scroll over it, when we move over it, I should say, with our mouse, the background color changes. So that's how that hover works. Now the other thing that we could do, and we will do, is we can also do something to the anchor, to the text inside it. As you can see, when I move over it, the background color changes. But one other thing that we can do is we can actually target the anchor inside it. So again, I'm gonna, again, rather than me type this all in, I'm just gonna copy paste it and explain as I go. So we're basically saying inside the list item, the anchor, when you hover over it, we're going to change the color to white. In fact, I think just quickly, I think I'd rather put this, it doesn't really matter, but I'm going to put it there because then it becomes quite clear that it's near to the hovering over the list item. So we're hovering over the list item, but we're also hovering over the text. So as you can see now, the text itself is changing color as well as the background color. And that's all happening because of this, what is called a pseudo selector called the hover. Now we do have these submenus, and as you can see, I've already hidden the submenus. So what we need to be able to do is when we actually then find an item that has further menus inside it, i.e. this one here, we want to be able to show those items so that we can navigate through deeper into the, as it happens, this item called information. So the way that we do that then is to provide, we've first of all we've hidden it. So what we need to do is to provide a way of displaying it when we hover over it. So the way that we do that is to use a hover over that list item again. But when we hover over that list item, we then want to target the unordered list inside that list item. So remember, you've got a list item inside an unordered list. So UL with list item inside it. But then inside that list item is another unordered list. So when that list item is then when we're hovering over it, we want to then reveal the unordered list that's currently hidden by this item here, display none. So we're basically going to change that, and the way that, because we want to use flex, we want to turn that object into flex. So obviously display none, you can display block again, which would actually reveal it. That would be one way of doing it. But since we want to make this the important thing is that this is not just one item inside the information block here for our menu. There's multiple ones, so we want to reveal all of them. We want to reveal them in a column. Okay, so therefore the way that we do this is we say, okay, when we're hovering over that list item, take the UL that's inside that list item and display it as a flex item. But not only that, make the flex direction, in other words, the direction that that flex is operating in, which is by default, by the way, by default, a flex object, normally the flex items inside a flex object will display as a row, across the page. What we want is down the page. So therefore we use flex direction column. So I'm going to save that now. And we'll go back over here. Now, as you can see, we've got something happening. It's not right, but we've got something happening. So what we need to do now is to work out how we're going to address what is wrong at the moment, which is that we've got the wrong width and we've got the items too far apart. Now, the reason for them being far apart is because once you actually turn something into a column, then your axis is the other way. So because we're basically saying generally that our ULs inside the navigation item have a certain space between them, because we're actually using a flex basis for those items. I think we've said further up here the flex basis for these items is, I've lost it again now. Let me just see where I put that. So the flex basis is here 8 REM, 8 rem. And that because we're saying that for the list items generally inside the nav, what we're actually doing is we're putting too much space between them when it goes vertical or in a column. So that's where we have to make a change. We have to specify what we want to do when the list item is inside a UL which is inside a list item. And so the way that we do that then is as follows. So we're going to plot that in there. So, and as you can see, nav, unordered list, list item, unordered list, list item. So we're going down the chain, really, down the chain, and we're targeting the list items that are inside. And what we're saying this time is the flex will not grow, it will shrink if necessary, and it will be an automatic distance between. So so the flex basis, that is the space that it's taking up vertically, will not be based on a number, it will simply be automatic. So it's going to actually use as little space as possible. However, because we also don't have a way of determining the width, because once we go up and down, the basis is up and down, we will need to give this a width. Now you can see that what I've done is I've given it the same width as the flex basis for the list item that this is inside. You'll see what I mean. What I'm saying is that before I save it, you can see that the distance between them therefore is too much because we're actually using 6 EM. As you can see, sorry, 8 EM, my mistake. Whereas the width across is just automatic. In other words, it's just giving enough space for the text with a little bit of margin, I think, either side. So what we actually want to do is we want to give it a width of 8 rem, which is the same as the flex basis for the items that are above it or that are the parent. So let's actually now save this and you'll see how that now works. Okay, so we've now brought them together and we've also then provided them with just enough space to make the column exactly the same width as the item that they sit in. I hope that makes sense. But there it is then, and I'm now going to move on to the next aspect of this, which is to get something to work on a smaller screen. Okay, so now it's time to find a way of making this more appropriate when we are looking at it on a small display or indeed a mobile. So in other words, it's responsive to different device sizes. So the way that I'm going to do this then is to use a media query. And as you know, the media query is quite simple. We need to put in here an @media like so. Then we're targeting the screen, so as opposed to any other device. And then we are deciding on a maximum width. Now, as I said before, I'm going for max width because now I'm determining what happens when it gets smaller than this size. Now I just generally tend to exaggerate this to begin with because it's not so easy to get the browser to sort of simulate this. It's easier to go for a large number for the moment, even though you probably would change this to a smaller number in reality, and we can use our tools to simulate what this looks like on a mobile device. But it's easier to start off with a number that's a little bit large generally. But so you'll see what I mean as we can test it. So inside this media query block, then I want to make some changes to the way that the display works. So the first thing I'm going to do is to look at my unordered list. Now if we just scroll back up again near the top, so you can see here that on our unordered list inside the nav, we are using display flex, and the default arrangement of the display flex, the default way that this flows is in a row. But what we want to do is to change this so that it goes into a column. So flex direction column is what we need here. And I'm just going to put that in here. So we want to go for nav UL and then, oh, I'm sorry, I'm typing it into the wrong place somehow. Something went wrong there. Okay. Nav UL, curly brackets, and then in here we just simply want to put the flex direction to be in a column. So let's just test that out first of all. As you can see, if I now shrink this down, that's what happens. So it goes into a column. Obviously, it's not particularly attractive like that. So we need to make a few changes. For a start, we need to make sure that this unordered list is not positioned in any other way other than the normal. So I'm going to change the position from what it is currently. So if I look at the position of this object, these URLs inside a list item, we've got an absolute position so that they can't actually, that they're not fluid, in other words, at this point. When we're looking at it, as you can see on the screen right now, they're actually in that position, in an absolute position without any variation on that. So what we need to do is to give this a little bit of flexibility, or indeed we want to set it back to the standard. And the standard, in other words, if you didn't have any position set at all, would be what we call position static. So I'm doing that as well here. And we'll just try that again. It's still exactly the same, but that's only because at the moment we've got too much space between them. Okay. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to again adjust the flex item so that it can't shrink, it can't grow, and also we want that, again, that auto, so that the distance between these items, because it's now in a column, we want the distance between those items up and down. We want that to be just whatever it's got available to it. In other words, the text itself not taking any more space other than the line height of that text. And so the way that we do that is to give it a flex of basis of auto. So I'm going to again paste this in here, and you'll see what happens, and I'll just explain it. So here we have flex with no shrink, no grow, and an auto flex basis. But at the same time, we're also going to give this a width of 100%, meaning that it's going to spread that all the way across the page. Actually, let's just not do that to begin with, just so that you can actually see what actually happens. Okay, so now we've saved it. Now so you can see we've got it in the right position, but at the moment, you see, everything is just we don't have the space across. It's sort of in a way a little bit awkward, it feels. I mean, obviously that is an option, but I think you'll see if I now change it, it does actually make it a little bit more comfortable in the sense that the whole of the width changes. Now you can also see that when I roll over information, which has submenus, it actually pushes the rest away. So that's basically, I mean, obviously changing of colours and so on, we can do that. We can also change the position of this if you prefer it to be arranged left, or if you want to change the font size. But basically that's the principle of it. And that's one approach. That, in a way, is the simplest approach. There are some issues, though, as you will no doubt see, because once we go down to this smaller size, then obviously we're taking up a large amount of space from the top of the body. And so all of your content is going to be hidden under that menu, which is currently there all the time. So this is something that you would need to address by providing a large margin on the body, so that it, when we go down to that size. Now I can't actually demonstrate this in this version because I've got no other content in here at the moment, because the next, and I'm going to do this in another video, where I'm actually giving you the alternative way of doing this, where we actually use what we call a hamburger menu. So watch for the next video, which will then explain that, because that in a way is the more standard approach. What I've shown you here is the basic simple approach, which is doable, as you can see, and it works with submenus. But it does provide some issues around the way that is always on screen when you're looking at it in a smaller display, and that can be a disadvantage.